Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by Prize Picks.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 176th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. So thanks, as always, for listening in and hearing us talking about pucks. We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff today, certainly about the Bruins and the 7-game losing streak that they're in the midst of right now. That is just the absolute bottom dropping out of them. But we're also going to talk plenty of youth hockey, high school hockey, state of Massachusetts hockey, all that stuff, because of who we have as guests. We have the New England Hockey Journal's Evan Marinovsky, longtime guest, and one of my longtime friends, guys that I covered when I covered high school hockey in the Middlesex League back when he was at Winchester, two-time state champion at Winchester, two-time state champion at Arlington High as a head coach, one of the legendary coaches in Massachusetts hockey, and was a Hobie Baker finalist at Princeton when he played there. But John, you played for the one of the Hanson brothers in Johnstown too, right?
Well, let me quote the slap shot. That's what it said in the yearbook, Jim.
That's right. Like John Messuri has seen and done everything in the world of hockey, so we are absolutely honored to have John Messuri with us today. John, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. Evan, how you doing, bud?
I'm good. Just to add a little to the Missouri lore, I had a parent, I think I've told you this, John. I had a parent come up to me at a fall hockey event back in like October, November. And they're like, I'm from Rhode Island. I listen to the podcast, New England Hockey Journal. I'm a subscriber. And they're like, I have no stake in the mass hockey game. But he's like, my favorite podcast you've ever done was with John Messuri. And I don't know Arlington from this. And I said, that is incredible. And I have gotten a lot of love for that John Messuri podcast. We did that, I think, last year, John.
Thanks.
So that was great.
Married 20-something years. If I could get my wife to love me again.
I hear you. We're kind of married to hockey, all of us, in a way, aren't we?
Yeah. She likes it too, though. That's good.
Yeah, no, my wife likes going to the game. She complains about all the time that we spend, all the money we spend, like summer tournaments and summer stuff that we do, but she loves watching her kids play, and she gets really into it too. So that keeps her going, There is something about like the drug, John, of like watching your kids, watching them play well, that I think parents do get addicted to when it comes to youth hockey, and that's some of what like brings out the crazy in people with youth hockey.
Yeah, that's all right. I mean, you know what, Joe, all the years coaching, like I never have if a parent's disgruntled with me because maybe they don't like how I'm using their kid or they want the kid to get more ice time or something like that, like I've never had a problem with that. I have more of a problem with the parent who's not in the rink, who's outside red cupping.
Yep.
Like, that's your job as a parent to care about your kid and hope that he's doing well and hope that he feels good about himself.
100%. Absolutely. I agree. All right. We're going to get into all of that stuff later on the second half of the show. And probably the majority of it will be about that. But we definitely have to start, I think.
Red cupping outside. We're going to spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah, no, we're not going to spend time on that because they can continue to red cup out in Gilmartin Arena and do what they're going to do out there while their kids are playing inside. And I also love the parents that aren't even red cupping. Like I used to see this a lot, especially in the summertime. They are sitting in the parking lot with the car running the whole time. Don't even come in the arena, and the kid goes in and plays. And
that's fascinating.
I don't know if they're on business calls. I don't know what the hell those people are doing. They're like professional hockey parents, like hanging out in the car, doing whatever, not watching their kid play. I don't get that at all. I would never do that in a million years. But we're going to get to all that. But let's get to our sponsors first real quick and give them a little love. Prize Picks. We love them. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right. 6-2 loss. Boston Bruins to the Anaheim Ducks late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. 7 losses in a row. They've been outscored 36-13 in those 7 losses. It's basically the same formula with an outgunned roster right now since they made all those moves at the deadline and they've got the injuries that they have. We're usually pretty good starts. I mean, even last night it wasn't that great a start, but at least it was scoreless until the very end of the first. Then the bottom drops out usually in the second period when they have the long change or they give up goals like in the last few minutes of the period. And all of a sudden it gets away from them because they just don't have the talent, A, to catch up once they're down by 2 or 3 goals, and B, I just think the vibe in that locker room is not great right now because it's been a tough year for them. John, just what do you make of what you've seen out of the Bruins this year, what you see right now, and sort of, what the path might be going forward as somebody that's just, been around the hockey world forever.
Yeah, last night's game was easy, though. That was Arlington versus Medford on the bench, so Arlington's going to win that one. So that was easy, with
That's
Greg
true.
Cronin versus Joe. No, I love Joe. I feel bad for Joe. Joe's a great guy. Played high school hockey against him.
Yep.
See him out and about here and there over the years. He's never forgotten where he's come from. He's a great guy. I feel terrible for him. He's going through this. I hope that he survives in some role or other because I think he's good for the system and the program.
Yeah.
I thought when I watched last night's game, I thought to myself as I'm watching it that Anaheim's has set a pace here that we're not going to like and want to keep up with through the game. So even though the score was where it was at the end of the first period, the game was over.
Yeah.
We'll even talk to our kids about it, like set a pace that the other team doesn't want to play at. They're on the road. They've been out in the West Coast. And then Greg, I was reading Greg Cronin's comments this morning, and he talked about that pace that they set in the beginning of the game.
Yep.
And that team's got some upside the next few years. They make a move or two. The Ducks do for sure.
Yeah. No, they outshot the team 15-5 in the first period. The Ducks outshot the Bruins 50. They controlled that period, no question about it, and they did set that pace. And then they ended up getting some bounces, towards the end of the second period, and that's really when it spiraled out of control.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. Like if you were looking at the two teams, the roster that you would want to have right now is the Anaheim Ducks, no doubt about it, given the young talent.
But Joe, are we really that far away? I mean, like when you really look at it, I know the diehards are probably thinking about jumping off the bridge, right? But like, who can survive their top 2D being out of the lineup?
Yeah.
Right. You take the top 2D out of the lineup, and you're shuffling 3 and 4 down to play 1 and 2 role, and 5 and 6 play 3 and 4. I mean, it's just not going to work, right? Like everything starts on the back end, and I'm sure at some point we're going to talk about Swayman.
Yep.
Right. Like you just, the other guy competes. Like that could have been way worse in the first period. That other guy competes. He competes harder than that. And Swayman's, we got to hope that he just needs a reset, get the season over with, get reset, and like come back and play the way he was playing.
Yeah. Evan, what your take on just what you've seen recently from the Bruins?
Yeah, it's funny. Last night, actually, I had a 7 a.m. men's league game this morning. So I was like, I don't have to watch this third period if I don't have to. And I went straight to bed. I think my biggest takeaway from last night was if they ran that is the worst roster in the league as currently constructed. Yeah. Like that team is a lock if they played a full season for the number 1 pick. And I genuinely do wonder, like, how many games are left, Haggs? Like 10?
Yeah. Roughly.
9? Like around
9,
that?
10, yep.
Like, do they get 2 more wins? Like, I don't know. And I know McAvoy was back practicing in a non-contact jersey on Wednesday and Thursday, but I still, like, I think they are destined for potentially the 5th pick, maybe. Like, you can, I think the Flyers are going to continue to bottom out.
Yep.
But like, I think they're only 5 points away from the Sabres right now. Like if the Bruins could find a way to lose enough, and it's such a loser mentality. Like I hate that I'm saying these things, but it's where they're at. And, to me, like that roster isn't good enough. And John, you're 100% right. You're out without McAvoy. You're without Lindholm on D. You hope that reinforcements come in up front in the offseason, which I'm sure we'll get to. Haggs, you and I are going to talk a lot in the offseason about what they can possibly do. Yeah. But you're just not good enough right now. You're not good enough to beat anybody. There's a reason you lost to San Jose the other night. There's a reason you got blown out by Anaheim last night and LA on Sunday. And that's where they're at. And it stinks for, as you said, like Joe Sacco. Like Joe Sacco gets, finally gets a chance to be the head coach of his hometown team. And he's dealt a horrible hand. This isn't his fault. This goes, up the chain. This is widespread. But I think over the next, the final bit of games, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they won one more game. I wouldn't be surprised.
No,
I honestly wouldn't. This roster is horrific.
No, which is okay though, right?
Third and fourth lines.
Like that's okay.
At this point,
I'm for it. I'm for it.
Games, I don't think so.
I'm for it.
The situation that they're in, and this is part of what's going on, right? I think is they've traded the players that they traded. They basically ripped a huge heart out of this team at the deadline when they traded those veterans away. And knowing that Lindholm and McAvoy were going to be out for a significant part of time down the stretch here, I think they kind of knew this was going to happen, and they made the, business decision that we're going to trade these veteran players. We're going to retool. The bottom is probably going to drop out over the last month and a half, 2 months of the season. And we're going to get the best first round pick, the highest first round pick that we can get, and sort of, move ahead to next year. And I think that's the motivation. The players obviously aren't going to be motivated to lose. They want to win. But I think the powers that be have kind of put the pieces into place where, not only they've got Fraser Minton and Matt Poitras down in Providence, who are two pretty good young players. They're looking at some other players up here, but I don't think they want them to win, like rip off an 8-game winning streak to end the season. I think you want to try to get the best first round pick you can get for them. My question is, like, are they going to get high enough to get a guy like James Haggs, Evan and John? And I know, John, you've seen plenty of Boston College this year, and Evan, you too. Yep. And is that a guy that could potentially help them if they were able to get that kind of a player?
I don't think I think Haggs is a good player. I don't think he's at Celebrini and Smitty's level. I really don't. Now, he's 1 year behind Celebrini, who was in 06. Was Smitty in 05? I think Smitty's in 05.
Smith's in 05. Yep.
They don't, so you got to give him, so could he get to, he could get there for sure. Like, I saw him early in the season. I was like, I didn't love him against Northeastern early, but I liked him better. I thought he was taking more command of games. So, yeah, he's got it. He's got the hockey sense. He's got all that, and he's super young. So I didn't think he was as good as those two in college, but when you look at the age differential, each one of those, well, Smitty was a year older than him at the same time, but him and Celebrini are the same age. So I don't think he's at Celebrini's level, but he could be at Smitty's level.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree. I think coming into this year, I thought Haggs was going to be a lot better. I thought Haggs was going to, sort of dominate college hockey and kind of follow in those footsteps, given his time at Mount and how good he looked at the program. I think he's one of those guys who needs a second year at BC. Like, I think he absolutely needs a second year.
Evan.
He is nowhere near ready, and that's the thing. And I hope those around him, and the BC guys are smart enough to know that, and I hope that, his representatives and his camp believe that. And I hope whoever drafts him says, you are going straight back to Chestnut Hill. We are not taking you immediately. And like, I have the mock draft up right now, and they have Haggs going at like 4, which right now would be Philly. Can the Bruins get to 5 or 6? Like, they're at 8 right now. I think they should be able to if they continue at this rate. And Haggs, I always use, like, and I know they're different positions, but like Cale Makar, I was at UMass when Cale was there, and that first year he was a 4th overall pick coming in, and he was a good, solid freshman year defenseman, great, good defenseman, but he wasn't popping off the page, and his numbers, if you go back and look, were not, they were fine, they were good, but he made the right decision in coming back, and he exploded, won the Hobie Baker, to me, like, I always go back to that, set the tone for his whole career. So Haggs probably will fall a little bit from where they thought he was going to be picked. Going into the year, he was, I think, consensus 1 or 2. Now he'll probably be 3, 4, maybe 5. Maybe a team goes off the board and he falls to 6, which would definitely help the Bruins. But I think people are overlooking a potential second year, really helping him mature. He's not a big guy. He's 5'10". So again, like, he's speedy, he's skilled, sort of like a Jack Hughes in a way, but I think he definitely needs that second year.
Yeah. And he's the 3rd best forward at BC.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. The bottom line, I guess I'm getting to in mentioning him and mentioning the first round pick, though, John, is that I feel like at this point with the Bruins, like, when we're going to get to Swayman, because I think the goaltending has definitely been an issue, and it really kind of submarined the beginning of this season, and it's never stabilized. But there's also the issue at center, and they bring in Elias Lindholm, they pay him a lot of money. He's definitely not a number 1 center. I think we can see he doesn't really want the puck, it seems like, as much as a center would or should. This definitely is not a puck transporter a lot through the neutral zone. Doesn't really drive the line that he's on as a center. Like, good hard-nosed player, pretty good two-way player, good on faceoffs, like, does some things well. But I think you make the determination now he's not a number 1 center. And I'm not sure Pavel Zacha is like an ideal number 1 center either. And it feels like, with Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci retiring, they still have not replace that number one center. And that's like the kind of linchpin to this team and the way the team was built. And they need a guy like that. And it feels like the only way they're going to get that guy is by drafting him and using this first round pick to get a player like that. It's not ideal, I think, to go out and try to get somebody else's player, trade for them, sign a guy in free agency because that didn't work with Lindholm, and then a lot of times that doesn't work. It feels like they really need to hit on this first-round pick that they're going to get now as a major sort of centerpiece to retooling this team. And, like, there's a lot of pressure on Bruins management, on Donnie and all the scouts to really hit on this first-round pick now and get a difference-making player.
I agree 100%. I still think, Joe, though, I wouldn't bet against the free agency signing here.
Yeah.
They got a little cap space.
Yep.
You know, they got probably one of the top 3 or 4 guys, if you were a center, you'd want to play with.
Yep, that's true.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think we're going down the road of San Jose and Chicago and nuking the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think you have more of a base in place to be able to, like, retool this quickly. Because people are going to want to play with Pasta.
Yep.
You know, McAvoy, Lindholm come back. Yeah, we got to hit in the draft pick. Like, the kid from last year who's at BC is nowhere near ready.
Yep.
He should have never, ever, ever came to BC this year.
Yep.
He should have, you know, we're going to end up talking about this in the next segment with high school and youth hockey and everything else. He rushed.
Yep.
You know?
It happens all the time.
It was funny, John, at the draft, he was talking about how he was probably only going to be at BC for a year or two, and then he was going to go pro. And it was like, he said that, and then I watched him like the next week or 2 weeks after that at Bruins development camp, and I'm like, this guy is not even ready for Boston College. Forget about like jumping to the pros afterwards. Like where he was coming from, he just wasn't ready for it.
No. He's trying to make a jump from prep school hockey to college hockey. That chasm is huge now.
Oh, it doesn't happen. So that's the thing.
Yeah.
And back to free agency, like, John, I agree with you. And I, you know, Haggs, you and I have talked about this. Like, to me, the route to this team being back in a playoff contention spot next year, because I think we all agree they're going to be better defensively next year because you're going to have Lindholm and McAvoy back, and you hope Swayman is better, which we'll get to in a second. But you do need to score. And I don't think there is a center in free agency that I'm paying big money for, but there is one guy I would pay a lot of money for. It's Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is you have Pastrnak drive that first line from the right wing, and you have Marner drive the second from the right wing. And you put a center, you know, you have Middlestat. You could, you know, if you want to try Lindholm there, you can. I agree with you guys. I don't think Lindholm is going to be this offensive dynamo he can't drive a line. Doesn't seem to really produce with lesser than guys. Doesn't really elevate the guys around him offensively. So for me, like I go with you. Your first line runs through Pastrnak. Your second line runs through Marner. Put guys with them. They're going to produce. Zacha works with Pastrnak. Geekie certainly does as well.
Yep. And
then is it Middlestat? Is it Lindholm? And do you sign another cheaper left wing? Like to me, that's how you do it. Center, I'm hesitant because I'm with you, Haggs. You're drafting your future number one center somewhere. And they have their 2 second-round picks this year, too. Second-round picks are valuable. Those guys often are overlooked for one reason or another, but can turn into long-time pros. And I think like I said this to someone the other day, like you have 3 picks in the top 2 rounds this season. You got to hit on 2. Yep. Or else all those deals and what you've gone through this year is not going to be worth it. Now, you're not going to know next year if those hit or not. Like I'm still, you know, Letourneau obviously has had a rough year this year. I give him another year at BC before I, say that he's on his way to being a bust or on his way to being really good. So we're not going to know for a while. But this draft is as big a draft as they've had since probably like 2006.
No, this whole offseason, there is a ton of pressure on Bruins management to hit home runs and to get things completely right, especially, trading away, amassing the picks, bringing in some prospects, getting a high first-round pick, where the team ended this year. That all sets up for them to really need to have a bunch of things go incredibly right and to really hit them on the head instead of overpaying for Elias Lindholm and feeling like he was going to be a higher center than he probably is going to end up being on this team. And Zadorov, I still like him as a player, and he's not, super duper expensive. Like, even if in this day and age with the cap going up, if he ends up a really good, third pairing guy, what he brings in the physical element and everything else, I think that's still okay. But I really think there's a lot of pressure on the Bruins now because of the way the season has gone, John, to make sure they get it right and to make sure they get it right both with draft picks and in free agency. And my question too is, if you do bring in Marner, and I agree with you, I think that's the only guy in free agency I overpay for, or I really bring the back up the Brinks truck for. Can you be a Stanley Cup contending team in the NHL where your top two lines are being driven by right wings and center centers, and your strength is on the wing instead of right down the middle, where everybody traditionally wants strength down the middle with your two centers, your defense, and your goalie? Like, is that a formula to be able to really be successful at the NHL level?
No, and I think that's part of the dilemma, like what we're saying, like which direction are you going, and like, are they going to go in the direction, like we said, like maybe they don't have to blow it up all the way, but if they don't want to blow it up all the way, they got to find something in free agency, right? And otherwise, then, okay, if you're going to go young and you're going to like these draft picks, like, okay, how any of them at Celebrini's level, and Celebrini's playing well and Bedard's playing well in Chicago, but how long does it take them to become fully impact guys to be able to carry a team and get those teams winning? So now, if that's the case, you're going to wait for that. Then I think you got to look at, this is not going to be a popular comment, then you got to look at Pastrnak and go, okay, by the time these draft picks get their stuff together, he's going to be 32, 33.
Yeah.
So if that's the plan, like maybe you got to think about doing something with him.
Well, and there was a story, I believe was in the Globe today, and I haven't read it yet, but I just looked at the headlines and I looked at the first quote, and it was with Cam Neely, and he was basically saying, like, the way this year has gone, everything is on the table in this offseason, and it should be. I when the season ends like this, I really think you got to evaluate everything. And I agree with you, John, that I think the first option is to retool. They have Pastrnak. They have a good defense. Like, the bones of this team, I think, are there to build around to potentially get it back into playoff contention, as soon as next year. I think they could be a much better team, especially if Swayman bounces back. Right. But I do think like they're going to have to do some serious soul searching, Evan, in this offseason and figure out if it's, some Band-Aids that you slap on and some real additions that you slap on that are, good and that are going to augment what you have here. Or if like you're better off just like, blowing it up for and sort of reloading for 2 or 3 years down the line. There's too much pressure, I think, from the fan base to really blow it up, but they're going to have to at least consider it this offseason.
Yeah, you mentioned cup contention. I think they're far from that. I think it's finding a way to be competitive these next 2 to 3 years, especially with Pastrnak. You have McAvoy locked up long term. You have that core there. We've talked about this a number of times. You have Pastrnak. You have McAvoy. You hope you have Swayman. So, like, you have those guys that you would ideally rebuild to go get. Their problem is, can you supplement that core with talent? And I think over the next 2 years, they're not going to be cup contenders. But if you go out and get Marner, if you go out and maybe add another wing, maybe you add a mid-tier defenseman on the back end to be a second pairing guy, you're not cup contenders, but you're in it. You're competitive. There's the hope. There's a reason for Pastrnak continuing to want to play here, and you hope that those 2 to 3 years of being in and around it give your young guys like Mitten and Patra and Letourneau and the guys you pick this year, and giving them time to sort of come into their own. And John, as you said, become impact guys at the NHL level, or even just guys that can help you at all.
Yeah.
And that's going to take time. And I don't think a rebuild's in order now. And I haven't read the Globe story either. I was trying to scroll through it as you were talking. I didn't pick much up from it. Two things at once. It's a little much. But I did, would they trade one of those core pieces? Maybe. I mean, I think they know that the seat is hot under them. And this offseason is huge. And if a Kachuk, Huberdeau type trade opens up, maybe you explore that.
Yeah.
But I think the realistic bet is put yourself in a position to compete the next 2 years, make your picks, develop your guys well, pick well, and hope that in 2028, 29, you really start to hit your stride again.
Yeah.
And you have Pastrnak.
Yeah. If Brady Kachuk becomes available, you do whatever needs to be done to get him. Yes. I'm fully on board with that. Let me stop for a sec, though, because we got to take a break to talk about Prize. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. PrizePicks is the best way to win cash while watching sports. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite hockey players with players from baseball, basketball, esports, and so much more. Here are some picks for this week. Anze Kopitar, more than 9.5 faceoffs won. Alex Ovechkin, more than 3.5 shots on net. And I really think you can take it to the bank that Alex Ovechkin is going to get 3.5 shots on net or more in every single game for the rest of the season. Chasing Wayne Gretzky. Dylan Larkin, more than 20 minutes of time on ice. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. PrizePicks also offers Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposit into your accounts this sports season. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's get into the goaltending. Jeremy Swayman. This whole situation for me it's gone sideways since way back when they traded Linus Ullmark. I really feel like, looking back in hindsight, and hindsight is obviously always 20/20, not hanging on to him until Swayman had signed on the dotted line, not knowing that Swayman and his agent were going to be as kind of hard line in the negotiations as they were, that he was going to try to get that big of a deal, which, I was very much against the entire time, because he had never proven he was a true number one. He'd always had a Vezina Trophy winning goaltender next to him as a partner his entire career. That's pretty good insurance next to you. And this was the first time he was going to have all the pressure on him, the physical and mental workload, like all of that stuff. And you throw like the training camp holdout on top of it for a young goalie, which he really could not recover from. This has been a horrendous year for him. .863 save percentage since the trade deadline. They are like 25th or 26th in the NHL in save percentage as a team. They were like second or third last year, and they've traditionally been in the top 5 every year. They've always gotten elite goaltending, and that has covered some mistakes and some blemishes that they have in their roster, and those have all been revealed this year. The goaltending has been just really poor. I do believe, though, John, that Jeremy Swayman can bounce back from this. He absolutely has to, really, for the Bruins to get back and retool and add some pieces and be a playoff contender again next year. But your thoughts just on Swayman, what you've seen through the course of this year, and how optimistic you are that he's going to bounce back next year.
Yeah, he's certainly a great goalie. There was just some, just the calmer and the mental part of it was just not right in the beginning of the year. And I think it's more mental than anything, right? Like, he's just never been able to mentally, get back to where he was last year in that focus. And it's such a fickle position, right? It's like being a golfer in a way. Like, I remember when Tiger Woods went through some tough stuff and kind of felt like the crowd was kind of like hush against him. It kind of affected how he played. And I think, that vibe's out there with Swayman, and I think it affects him. I think it's more mental than anything. I really do.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Something mental going on with a goalie. Who would have thought of that? Never heard or seen that before.
Oh,
Evan,
my God. The only other thing that scares me, Joe, though, with him is how many of these rush signings do you see over the years? Like the Pittsburgh Penguins are famous with goalies. Totally. Like a goalie has one good year and they just like boom, and they give him the keys. It's Christian Jarry, right? Like,
yep.
Vegas did it a couple of years ago with the guy who got him through to the cup, and then just was it Hill?
Yeah.
Oh, it was Hill, not
right.
Lennon.
And then like bang, all of a sudden, and these rush signings with these goalies, I don't know. I think they're fickle. I think they're like pitches, a couple of bad outings and they can't recover from it. And I don't know. I don't think he had earned that contract. He'd only played 82 games.
Nope. No, he'd never started more than it was like 45 games, somewhere in that area in his career. And he basically skipped that middle step, that like 3 years, $15 million like somewhere in there, that middle contract you get before the really big one. He basically skipped over that step and got the 8-year huge money deal, because, you know, he held out and they played hardball, and they were able to do that because they had the leverage with Ullmark gone and having been traded. And I'm not sure that Sweens and Cam anticipated that he was going to do that, you know, and I think that probably surprised them. And that's why it turned a little, you know, ugly for a while when they were sort of sniping back and forth at each other. And that's very strange and different from Bruins negotiations, which have never really gone down that route before. And I do feel like that the way that played out, combined with knowing that was going to like really hurt them at the beginning of the season and really compromise the quality of this season for the team, I do think that created something in the locker room with that team and some of those players. Like, usually you don't see players begrudge other players for getting their money, right? They all understand that they're going to have times when they negotiate and taking care of themselves and their family and all that stuff. But when it really starts to affect the team like that, I do think maybe you can, especially when you come back in afterwards and you play the way that he's played, that's going to, you know, raise up the hard feelings maybe a little bit, or raise up the emotions a little bit. And I think we've seen that, Evan. With him, I think Marchand was critical of him at times. He would say every time we make a mistake, it seems like it's in the back of the net. He said that back in December, or no, that was right before he got traded. In December, they tried to, a reporter asked Marchand, like, do you feel bad hanging Swayman out to dry when it was like an 8-1 loss to Winnipeg? And he's like, no, he was part of it too. He was bad just like the rest of us. And it was like, you know, there's been times this year where what the players have said have kind of let you know they know that Swayman's struggling and he needed to get better. And they didn't talk about him like they usually talk about other goalies. And that to me indicated there was something going on there. And I think,
well, I mean, even
go ahead.
I was going to say, you even look at Nikita Zadorov's comment the other night. Everybody focuses on, you know, him talking about the fight, but how about the first thing he said? Everything's going in.
Right.
I mean, he's right. Everything is going in. And it's obviously, there's a lot on the defense. They've been porous.
Yep.
But I think it's been a perfect storm. I mean, when we look back on this season, I think we'll want to look back on it very quickly and move on. But I think it's been a perfect storm of crap that started at the beginning of the year that they never came out from under. They've been underwater. Swayman has been underwater since the beginning of the year and not able to get fresh air. And the team hasn't. I mean, you think about the Montgomery situation. That was a huge, you know, I think that was such an undercurrent. And I think any other season, that would have been a number one storyline had the Swayman stuff not been happening. And then you look at Swayman and he misses all of training camp and he, you know, rushes onto the team plane to go down to Florida. And, you know, it's great that he's working out at BU, but that's not NHL work. No. You know, that just isn't that. And I think it did leave a bad taste in people's mouths. And I think he hasn't been able to overcome that. And he's had some good stretches at times. But then you see him resort, and then you see him start 3 games in a row, and that third game is awful. I mean, I go back to the game at Ottawa, 3 games after the deadline, after they beat Tampa, they beat Florida, and it was like, maybe they'll be a little bit better. And he gave up 4 in the first and was yanked.
Yep.
And I think that's sort of been a microcosm of his season. It's been a microcosm of their season.
Yep.
And I think, if he is like this next year, you are looking at a rebuild. Because that's your only goalie, and that's a lot of money that you're putting into him. And I think that is when you start to look at a rebuild if he is like this next season.
Yeah, no, he can't be. There's no choice. Like, he can't be like this next season. He has to be better, and he's shown that he can be better. And to John's point, like, I view goalies in the NHL like relievers in baseball, Major League Baseball. Like, they have a good year, a bad year. Like, some of them can have a few good years in a row, and then they'll have a bad. Like,
happy opening day, by the way.
Happy opening day for the Red Sox. That's right. Very appropriate metaphor there. But there's a lot of volatility in that position, and there's a lot of volatility in the goaltending position too, where guys can have good years and bad years, and so much of it is, you know, there's so many factors involved with the goalies, and there's also a belief, I think, a lot of people in the NHL that goalies are very replaceable too. You know, you can find another goalie that can give you most of what you're getting from a certain goalie. I think the one thing that differentiates Swayman from a lot of other guys is the way he performed in the playoffs last year. And once you're a goalie and you show that you can be lights out, dominant, you can steal games in the playoffs, that kind of raises your profile a little bit. And that's part of the reason why the Bruins overpaid for him too. But like, how much do you believe, John, that you think Swayman is going to bounce back? Just, you know, having watched him play, just knowing the goaltending position and knowing how important it is just to the Bruins' fortunes in general.
Again, I think it's going to be how he's handled mentally. I think with a goalie, you never want to put a goalie in a position where he's mentally thinking like, I'll show you. Right?
Yeah.
Like, You know what I mean? Like, you don't want them thinking like, all right, I'm going to show you. Like, you want them focused and calm. And like I said, I think it's so mental that you couldn't have asked for a worse situation for a goalie. Not only was it, the contract, but like you said, Joe, it was out in the open, and it was like people picking sides, and goalies, you just want to leave them alone. I barely talk to them. I'm not even sure I know the first name of my two goalies. I give it to my goalie coach. I don't. I'll just screw them up.
And that's usually what happens with the Bruins. It's goalie Bob. Goalie Bob, the coaches are like, I don't even want to talk about the goalies. And goalie Bob's not allowed to talk to us. So it's
no.
You never get anything about the goalies.
I think he's, you know what, we're going to have a long off season for the first time in a while. Give him a chance to reset, right? You put Lindholm and you put McAvoy in front of him, immediately things get more comfortable for him.
Yep.
Right? And then, you keep it simple and you go from there.
Have a head coach who wants to be here too. That would also help. Like next season, I mean. I assume they're going to have a new head coach.
I would think so, right?
Yeah. So again, you're not going to have a coach that's a potential lame duck like Montgomery was, like at the beginning of the year.
Right.
I think that's going to help. It's going to help any goalie as well. Maybe it's Torts. Maybe it's Torts.
Well, I mean,
that'll be a different.
The name I keep hearing over and over from people is Mike Sullivan, who obviously still has a job right now. But there's been a lot of noise about him potentially coming back to Boston for another, run with the Bruins, and that would be interesting. I still think they would probably side more towards an NCAA coach. I know Sweeney likes those kind of guys. Nate Lehman's been connected to them for a long time, and has even jumped on the ice and helped out at development camps and stuff. But if that does happen and they go with a more inexperienced coach, John, I think that does open the door, and it should, for Joe Sacco to stick around as the associate, veteran sort of head coach, especially after being a good soldier and sort of taking on what's happened here in the second half of the year.
Yeah, let's hope I think Joe's a good presence, and I think, in that associate role, he's a good presence. The guys always look comfortable around him, and he knows how to talk to the guys, and I think he's a good presence for them, be a calming influence depending on who they bring in, But you know what, the NHL's really good. Like they've got most of these GMs have one of those blue barrels in front of their office, and they just recycle.
Yes, you're in the club for life. It's beautiful.
That's true. My dream, by the way, my dream is that John Messuri becomes the Bruins head coach. That is my dream. And my ultimate dream is the idea of John doing the big press conferences and just the great things you would say, and the Bruins attempt at trying to media train you, and you just be like, nope, I'm doing it my way, and it would be unbelievably amazing, and I would be so for it.
Evan, I would run home in the 90s when I first started coaching and leave wherever I was at work when Bill Parcells was having his weekly press conference. I couldn't get there fast enough.
Yep.
He was the best.
Yep. I love Jim Montgomery was a solid head coach, not great with the media, not very quotable. Joe Sacco is definitely a meat and potatoes kind of guy, like an old school, very steady hockey guy, but you can tell he's never going to be the quote machine that some other coaches are. John Messuri, I would absolutely love to be sitting in press conferences asking questions after games, and just on practice days afterwards, if you wanted to break down drills or video that you were doing and stuff like that Parcells and Belichick used to do, and show us what you're showing the play. That's the good stuff,
Right.
You could do that.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun. I don't think Donnie's going to give me the job. He's still got an axe.
You got to throw your name in.
Well, he's still got an axe to grind. In '87, he was runner-up to me to Ivy League Player of the Year that year. So, and trust me, I saw him this year over at Northeast, and we sat for a little bit. I remind him of it every time. Did they give out a second place plaque for that award?
You're like, I can't find the trophy anymore. Where'd it go? You've seen it?
I like Donnie. I listen on that front. I mean, maybe not the way it's going, but I think he's a smart guy, and I think if they give him a runway here, he'll figure it out. I hope they don't panic.
Yeah, I agree.
He's a smart guy, man. He's a very smart guy. He's a very stand-up guy. Another guy who hasn't forgotten where he's come from.
Absolutely.
I hope they give him runway here and let him go.
I agree, and he cares. Like he cares about the crest. He cares about the organization. He has pride in that, and he wants the players to have the same. And I'm sure it's killing him what's going on right now. But I also think they wouldn't have allowed him to make all the trades that he made and do all the stuff that he did if they weren't going to give him the runway to see what he can do with it and bring all the pieces back and build it back up for next year. All right, that's enough about the Bruins. Let's get to the state of just Massachusetts hockey, youth hockey. John, like, what's on your mind just about your experiences with the state of hockey in Massachusetts? You have two sons that have played, so you've seen it, are playing now that you've seen up close. Anthony's a junior at Northeastern this year, had an excellent season, had a great bean pot, led them in plus minus. I know he was in and out of the lineup, but he had a great year. And then you also have JP, who's a sophomore at Arlington, outstanding season for your Arlington High team that I know you guys fell in. It was a double overtime to St. John Shrewsbury.
Yeah, that was a bummer. Good game, exciting game. We can talk about that more later. But, I was happy, look at the only positive thing is the coach on the other bench was an Arlington guy, Mike Mead. And he's done a great job out there. And his dad, Salty, no longer with us, was a very influential person in Arlington hockey. And so, if we were going down to Mike wasn't the worst thing. I didn't love the way the third period played out, but what are you going to do?
But as far as just what you've seen over the years, coaching your boys, watching them play for other organizations and programs, just knowing so many people that are involved in, all the way up from the grassroots and the youth levels, all the way through the high school levels to, junior and college. What's your take on what's going on right now in Massachusetts? What you like, what you don't like, where we are?
I almost feel like I should be like Leslie Nielsen in The Naked Gun when all the fireworks are going off in the background and he's screaming nothing to see here.
Yeah.
Like that's the state of Massachusetts hockey. Okay. Like Evan and I have had this discussion. It's chaos. It's just chaos. It's the town programs are almost all gone, almost all dead. It's a money sport, right? It's expensive to play now. And, everybody's getting pulled in many different directions because there is money to be made by all these programs. So there's recruiting going on as early as squirts, right? You get a load of that, kid with the genetics as a mite. And the next thing you know, he's got to go play over on this program over here. And then all those same players are on that same team. And they've built this one-team powerhouse, a 2 or 3 team powerhouse, and I don't think that's good for the development over time of the kids to all be on a power team, right? I had a conversation with one of my defensemen this year who you'll probably be able to figure it out, Evan, who it is, but he plays on.
I think I can already tell where this is going.
Yeah, he plays on the best 15 team in the state and maybe in the country, right?
Definitely. Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Probably.
Right. And so I told him, look, you got to understand, he was our top D. And I'm like, but you got to understand, when you make a mistake here versus there, you have 4 other kids on the ice who are better than the other 5 that you're playing with who, cover that mistake up quickly. Right. There's bigger consequences to bad turnovers and mismanagement of the puck here because you don't have all that firepower around you. So, it's the super teams I'm not a fan of. I think you should play, where you can be successful, and you should play where it's going to be fun because you know what, it's easy to say, but it's a long road. For these kids, it's such a long road and the travel. I live in Arlington. I remember being a kid and we played in Burlington. I thought it was I was going to get jet lag. These kids are driving everywhere to play a hockey game on a Saturday. And we were talking about it. I mean, if you want to be a better player, it's ice time. You got to get out on the ice and, whether it's stick practice or stuff like that. But I just think, I don't know that we can put it back in the box. Evan, you and I have talked about this, but I think there's a way to make it better and more efficient, maybe keep the cost down so that more kids have the ability to develop later in life. I think I think the late bloomer is in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Because there's really nowhere for him to go to bloom these days.
No. The one thing I would say that's going to be interesting, and where I'm just approaching that now, like Finn, my son's a first-year Pee Wee, so he's still got another year of Pee Wees after that. But I would think, or at least from what I see, there does seem to be a little bit of a dividing line once they get to that bantam age, where like some kids are just going to completely drop out of the sport once the hitting really gets going and gets real, or just not want the puck as much anymore, you know? And maybe that combined with like puberty kicking in is sort of the last sort of dividing line where, like, you know, some kids will drop out, some other kids will fill in, but, you know, that's one of those things where, you know, maybe it will change some of it. But like I've always had Finn's played club, but he's also played town. And I feel like I kind of what you're saying, John, the club can sometimes feel like a business. It can feel like it's a little serious, especially for kids on the younger ages. Like they still need that fun element. And I think promoting town hockey and getting them to still play town hockey, and the other one, if you can get them to play two teams, is really sort of the best of both worlds, as long as the parents are willing to do it. But it allows the kid to have fun, and maybe even, to your point, like dominate too, if he's like, you know, a third line guy on the super team and doesn't score a lot and doesn't do whatever, he can be on the town team and score a bunch and get that level of development there too. And it's important to get all of that stuff together, right, for a young player that's developing.
Right. Yeah, there's no question about that. Like, I think you got to have success. And like, I think, Evan, I said this to you, like if you grew up in Pedro Martinez's neighborhood, you probably didn't become a very good hitter.
That's true.
Right.
You didn't use that analogy with me. I wish you used that with me. That's a good one.
So like, yeah, I mean, you want to go where you can score some goals, because when you score a goal, it leaves a mark, right? Like, oh, that's how I scored.
Yep.
Right? Like it leaves a mark.
I scored one this morning, John. I'm riding high.
Well, did you bang one in today?
I did on D in a hard league too, John. I don't get a lot.
More
so when I
importantly,
do,
what
it's
was your plus minus?
I was out there for 3 goals against, but I was out there for like 5 goals.
All right,
There
that's
you
a
go.
good day.
Plus player.
That's a good day. So yeah, I mean, you want to see the puck go in the net because you learn from that. Like, you know, and like the other thing, like we all talk about, some people, you know, there are some people out there, hey, my kid's playing hockey, my kid's playing soccer, my kid's playing lacrosse. I want him to have an activity while he's growing up. And they're not like chasing, like, hey, I want to be a great high school player, and I want to. So when we have these conversations, we got to put it in the context of, we're talking about the parent who's trying to develop his kid to be a good high school prep player and maybe play college someday. So how do you get there? And I just see so many people over the years mess it up by rushing, jumping, being talked into leaving when they're not ready to leave. You know, and like you said, like pushing over and being a third line guy on a team when he should have just stayed. Instead of going up the ladder, he should have just stayed where he was at. Maybe like we talk about my Penguins program, Joe, stayed there and, you know, figured out how to, you know, get a goal or two a game at that level and then move.
Yep.
And go to the next level.
Yeah, I think you're right, John. And it's interesting because I think there's a couple things that worry me. I mean, there's a lot that worries me, but one of the things that definitely worries me is we sort of talk about the death of town hockey. And I think when you look at, you know, people look at the MIAA and say, well, why are there only a couple really good public schools every year? And I think that's where you trace it down and you see that kids, you know, I grew up playing for Framingham. I grew up wanting to play at Framingham High. That doesn't happen as much anymore. And it's, you know, there's Arlington, there's Hingham, there's Marshfield, a little bit Belmont, there's a little bit of Winchester. And in Division I, and outside of that, unless I'm forgetting a school or two,
Reading,
yeah. Reading's a good one, but that's like 5 or 6 places. It used to be much bigger, and it used to be much more, much vaster. And I think it goes back to kids, as you said, opting for club hockey, and it's gotten way, way bigger. I mean, I was only going up through the youth ranks 15 years ago, maybe. No, that's not that long ago, and it, you know, only the top of the top kids played club. And nowadays they've realized we don't need to just have a tier 1 team. We can have tier 2 and we can have an elite and we can have this and that. And it's drawn parents away. And I think, like, you know, you see it, and I hear this from prep parents a lot, you know, especially when you're on those junior Eagles tier 1 teams coming up that produce a lot of good guys. Like, I think there's a feeling in the locker room of like, well, he's going to Rivers and he's going to Dexter and I'm in 8th grade and I'm at my town high school still. Am I doing the wrong thing? Should I leave and go to a prep school? And I think there needs to be more of that. Like, I mean, maybe, but you're probably better off dominate MIAA first. Like, there's only a handful of kids that can go into a prep school in 8th or 9th grade and make a real impact at the varsity level. There's maybe like 5 or 6. And there's a good chance you're not one of those 5 or 6, unfortunately, and that's okay.
Right.
And go dominate your town high school. And if you're really good at any town, they will find you. Prep schools, prep coaches will find you. And John, I know you deal with this all the time. Like, and it's tough because it's tough to look at yourself as not the final destination anymore. How do you approach sort of realizing, all right, like for an Evan Jones, I'm going to be his home for a year or two, and then he's going to move on. And 10 years ago, you'd have him for 4 years.
It could be the same thing
in
with
today's
Kurt
day
Beck
and age,
and maybe JP, right? Like, Kurt can't play 4 years for me here now in the state of, and the reason being is so many kids have left, right? Like, so many kids have gotten out, but it's I mean, so first of all, if you're in 8th grade and your parents want you to go to prep school and you go to prep school, but if again, we put it in the context of people who are saying, okay, how do I develop my kid and what's the route here? Well, I'm going to be on a phone call tonight with one of my players in a junior team, and the junior team's actually trying to slow the guy down. The guy gets it. Like, okay, like you're not going to go up the Quebec Major Junior League next year. Like, and this guy isn't with the Quebec Major Junior League, but those guys are now in here and they're trying to convince the prep school and high school kids to get up there right away. And it's like, oh boy, here we go, even worse, right? So let it play out, see where you play. Like Chris Kreider played at Masconomic for 2 years.
Yeah.
The kid Capone, who's at BU, played at Mansfield High for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? LaChance played 2 years. He's the captain at BU, played 2 years at Andover. And like we've talked about Jonesy. I think Jonesy's where he's at because the way he let it play out. I think if Jonesy had gone to prep school, he would never get a commitment to Dartmouth last year.
I agree. I think he's, to me, and it's tough because he's really good. Like, he was really good as is. So it's hard to use him as an example, but I think when I hear of certain kids jumping to prep from the MIAA, I'm like, did you have an impact like Evan Jones?
Right.
Were you a top point getter on your team? Were you dominating games? Were you impossible to miss?
Right.
And there were even kids this year, I'm not going to name kids, but who, prep schools are hot after. And I'm hearing that they're leaving and I'm like, there were games I didn't notice them. And like that to me is an issue. And there's no rush. We run into this all the time. And this isn't just an MIA to prep or a town to club thing. When you're in youth hockey, it's prep to junior.
Oh, they rush.
We talked about this with Letourneau. Everyone's in a rush. It's like, settle down. You don't all have to be 18-year-old freshmen at college. I talk to college coaches all the time who say to NTDP kids often who are not the top end kids, like, go to the USHL for a year and dominate there. And I think with Letourneau, like, he's the perfect example of go to, I forget if it was Sioux City or where it was, whoever had his rights, but go to the USHL. And I know Will Smith left early and that sort of, put the whole idea of Letourneau going to the USHL in a blender, but like, that's the perfect example. Like, Alfie Michaud at Maine gave me a great quote once. He said, I've seen a lot of underseasoned players, but I've never seen any overseasoned ones. And that is applicable to every level.
Yeah.
Right.
Every level.
No, 100%. And almost all sports, right? Like every sport. I mean, it's in every sport. So, yeah. So the question is, your job as a parent, if your kid's like, hey, Dad, Mom, I love hockey, then your job is to provide a support system for him to help him if he's working at it, to help him try to realize his dreams and, see it through. And like, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But I think as a parent, we were talking about this earlier, your job is to care for your kid and be like, try to put him in the best situations possible. But you definitely get that anxiety going. And I understand it of, oh my God, New Hampton Lawrence Academy's talking to me. I got to go. You know what I mean? So I haven't had a player leave. This will be year 29 next year. I haven't had a player leave yet and get a Division I deal. All my Division I players had the deal in place before they started playing at the next level. And I've lost a lot of players who are all good kids. A lot of them come back playing the alumni game. It's all great. I love them just as much. But, the pursuit of, like, and again, like Jonesy, Sadowski, I was like all on board. Like, you guys, you guys got to think about going and blah, 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 blah. And I'll talk to prep schools for. It's changed so much, Evan, that the prep school coaches actually call me now. What do you got? With Joe, when you were covering my Winchester team, that would have been like, there would have been a few swear words in there. Would have looked like Dan Hurley from UConn coming off the court.
Now, when we talk about certain kids, we're talking about a small percentage where the prep schools are chasing after them, or they have that pathway to go to there. John, for the majority of people that have kids playing youth hockey, right? And the ones that are really chasing it and going hard after it and, want what's best for their kid and the anxiety that you're talking about, all that stuff. I think the realistic conversation to have with all of them, or sort of the realistic view as a parent, is your best case scenario, or what your biggest long-term goal should be, is your kid can play high school hockey, have a good high school hockey career, have it kind of end on their terms at that point, and then they love the game after that and they play men's league and all that stuff, afterwards. That's the most realistic. And even that is not going to be attainable for a lot of kids that aren't going to be quite at the level to be able to play competitive high school hockey. But that's probably the goal that you should be looking at, instead of thinking my kid's going to play D1 or D3, especially with the way things have changed now with, OHL kids or CHL kids now being allowed to, keep their eligibility. Yeah. I think that's going to push even more kids out of the college picture from New England and kids around here. And it's going to make it even more competitive. So having a high school hockey career, I think is the goal, or should be a goal for a lot of people that have their kids playing club, playing town, doing whatever right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, that should be your goal. Again, it's all you try and provide your kid with a good experience, right?
Yep.
And then if he's in that high school, whatever, if he's at prep school, whatever, and it's going great, and you'll know if you're Carter Myers, we don't have to talk about him. You'll know that. That's right. Pretty easy, right? But for the other people, they're like, oh, if I go do this program, then I'm going to be him, right? And that's just that's let your kid enjoy it, find success, and then like I said, move them through the ladder. Neither one of my boys played. Anthony didn't play. Like you said, he had a pretty good season this year. I think he was second on the team in plus minus, and was pretty good feat to be able to pull that off.
Yeah,
and he didn't play elite hockey until he was 18. That was the first time he played elite hockey, when he was 18 years old. So, and JP not until he was 14. And you can see when they play, because they spent the majority of their time playing hockey where they could make plays, they try to make plays. You can see Anthony, even though he's a bottom six guy, when he gets the puck, his vision goes to, and I could almost he's looking for a guy in the back door. Right, where I see a lot of guys, they get the puck and okay, how do I cycle the puck back in the corner?
Yeah.
And I'm going to cycle it again, because that's all I've grown up doing, is cycling pucks and go in the net and let pucks hit me and go in the net. So and again, it's a convenience thing, and you'll know if you move up the ladder, you'll know if you're having success, and yeah, hey, for some people, going to the brick tournament's the right thing. Your kids, I don't know how old you got to be, 10 or 12. How old's the brick tournament? 12? 10?
Yeah, 10.
Is it 10?
Yeah. You got a kid who's a genetic freak, and, you can tell, okay, those are the kids who should go play in the brick tournament if that's what you want to do as a parent and have that experience. I mean, it's a good experience. At the end of the day, like I told my kids after, we lost this year, and like I said, when we weren't really thrilled how the game played out. But I told them the next day, I'm like, guys, I lost in 1980 in a Babe Ruth World Series. We've lost 2020. We lost, we were the best team, and then they shut us down with COVID. We couldn't play the finals. But you know what? It's all just memories. You only get certain times in your life where you can have an impactful, fun memory. You're still going to have great memories from this season and how it played out. And that's all we're really chasing, because otherwise, if you don't have those memories, how do you even have a podcast someday?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
That's right.
you're
right.
Like you're just trying to have a good experience and good memories. And, that's all we're trying to foster, So I think some people miss out on opportunities for their kids to have a good experience. I think a fun line in the movie Hoosiers, with Gene Hackman just recently passing away, is there's a line in that movie where she says, the principal makes a comment to him about, well, basketball players around here are treated like gods. And then he responds, well, everybody would like to be treated like a god just once in their life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's when Finn scores a winner in a tournament, at a Christmas tournament, like that's a great feeling. He'll remember that for the rest of his life. And that's like the cool part we're all getting through to get there. If you end up like David Pasternak, awesome.
Yep, absolutely.
Haggs, you hit it on the head with the majority of people. That was me. Like, it was just, I want to play for my high school. I want to help win a state championship. I want to, my dad's thing was just play a shift of varsity hockey. And like, I think that's the majority of people. And like, obviously, like, I cover a lot of the higher end hockey, and I cover MIA too. And so sometimes I get wrapped up in like, the path up, and then you're like, no, the average kid wants to just have a good experience at their town, try to win, have a good time with his buddies, and he'll play men's league with those guys the rest of his life. I also think another avenue you're seeing come up a lot is club hockey. Club hockey's gotten way bigger and way better, because I think a lot of kids look at the path after high school of years of junior to play like a little bit of Division III hockey. And they say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go play in ACHA at UMass or BC or Syracuse or wherever. And it's really good hockey.
Yeah, you're talking collegiate club hockey. Yes.
Collegiate club hockey.
Yep.
Yes. Collegiate club hockey. And that's become a bigger thing. And you can, and the MIA puts a lot of kids in club hockey. And it's really good hockey. We get messages all the time from people saying, why don't you cover club hockey?
It's good.
In college? And it's a legit question, because it's really good hockey. So the MIA, I always go back to this, John. Like, I think the MIA will all, like, people are like, is high school hockey dead? And I'm like, no, it's not dead. It's just, is it producing NHL draft picks? No. But what it does have is a lot of kids who are good hockey players who want to represent their town and play with their buddies in front of their classmates and girlfriends and family. And that's what it's about. And you see that at the Garden every year. You see that when you go to an Arlington Winchester game. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, the games, our tournament games were electric, right? And then, like, the St. John's Prep Arlington game, and Coach Hansen does a great job up there. And, like, he lost a lot of guys, and to flip that team around, be that good again. That place up at Chelmsford Forum was better than any college game I went to all year. It was off the Richter scales, that game. Packed, electric, fun. And so the crowds are still there. So it's still going to be fun. It's still going to draw, and it is what it is. Like, this is what it is. And we're not going to be able to put unless someday somebody wants to be the bad guy and put out a spreadsheet that says, hey, here are all the kids who left, and here's where they're playing. And two of them were just -2 playing against Evan at a 7 a.m. game on a Thursday morning.
I was going to say, they all filtered to play me, which is, that's unfortunate. All that for that. I agree.
But it's true, though. At the end of the day, it is about the memories, as John said. That is a huge part of this. Like, that's what everybody's sort of going to take away after this whole experience. And the memories, I think, are best in a lot of cases from you playing with the kids you grew up with in the town that you were in, and continuing to play with them for as long as you can on the way up, and probably even a year or two into high school. If you're that next level kid that can go somewhere else, you should at least be playing high school hockey for a couple of years, because you're never ever going to be able to replace that memory with anything else of you being able to play with your buddies at your school and the kids you grew up with. Like, that is something when you're 35, 40 years old, long after you're playing hockey, you're still going to think about. So that's a great point by you. John, can we do this again maybe like next month? What do you think?
Let me see where my golf game's at.
All right. Maybe we'll reconvene next month and we'll talk even more about mass hockey and what the Bruins are doing, because I'd love to have both you guys on again to do this again soon. That hour went by fast. John and Evan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Joe.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's give a little love to Prize Picks before we go. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. John and Evan, thank you very much for joining us. And everybody else out there, we'll see you at the rink.